Aegon once stood here as I do, looking down on this table. Do you think we would name him Aegon the Conqueror today if he had not had dragons? Stannis Baratheon to Davos Seaworth, A Storm of Swords, Chapter 54. Davos 5. Given the sheer impact they had on the history of Westeros, we know surprisingly very little about the lives of Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys prior to the conquest itself. While at this time Westeros was still divided into several kingdoms, the Maesters of the Citadel of Oldtown have been documenting the history of Westeros and the rise and fall of kingdoms for centuries, from the pettiest of kings to the rulers of great kingdoms, dating back thousands of years. There is some kind of record for it within the Citadel, and while yes, House Targaryen and Aegon at this time were merely lords of Dragonstone, given their Valyrian heritage, dragons, and control over Blackwater Bay, it does come across as odd that we know so little about the early life of the three heads of the dragon. Visenya, Aegon's eldest sister, was born in 29 BC, Rhaenys, his younger sister, in 25 BC, and Aegon himself in 27 BC. The only true detail we know from their childhood is that from a very young age both Visenya and Aegon were trained in martial pursuits, with the pair often spending their time training together. Aegon and Visenya both became accomplished swordsmen, with Visenya more than equal to her brother. Upon his father's death, Aegon would wield the Targaryen ancestral Valyrian steel sword Blackfire. Visenya too would be given a Valyrian steel blade of her own, a slimmer blade better suited for a female fighter, a blade called Dark Sister. Both those names would be a legacy written in blood in the years to come. While Rhaenys was not much of a fighter or a swordsman, it is widely accepted given her role in the conquest to come. She too did have some at least minimal training in combat, even if it never did develop into a passion like her siblings. It is a very common myth that Aegon and his sisters never visited Westeros before the conquest, and the day he landed on the shores of Blackwater Bay was the first time he would set foot upon his new kingdom. But this is not the case, and never really made sense in the first place, invented to make the tale of the conquest more exciting. One of the very few things that we know that Aegon and his sisters did pre-conquest as a fact is that he and Visenya at some point in their youth visited Oldtown and the Arbour in the Reach. It would be odd that while in Oldtown they did not meet with the Lords of Oldtown, House Hightower, but if they did this it was not recorded. There is also a rumour suggesting they too visited Lannisport. If this is the case, it's not a huge leap in logic given Lannisport's proximity to Casterly Rock. They may have visited the seat of House Lannister, the then kings in the west. Given how these trips were commonly forgotten when the tales of the conquest are told, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Aegon and his sisters visited many other places in Westeros over the years, with these trips not set down in the annals of history, like the Oldtown trip, which is barely recalled itself. At the very least, it's safe to assume they explored the immediate area around Blackwater Bay, at the very least, especially when it came to building relations with some of the houses that would initially support Aegon during the conquest, such as House Velaryon and House Celtigar. One thing that is often used to try and disprove this idea of Aegon and his sisters visiting Westeros prior to the conquest is that surely if they had flown across the realm on their dragons, that kind of event would have been noteworthy enough historically, given they were the last three dragons in the world, in a place where dragons were far from common to begin with. But in the wider context of events to come, it is easy to see why specific details like this missed being recorded in the history books. It also, of course, is possible that Aegon and his sisters made these trips via land or by ship, but this seems unlikely given how fast dragons are and the security that they provide. House Targaryen, being of Valyrian descent, still practiced many of the lost customs of the freehold, one of these being incestuous marriages between siblings and close relatives, in order to keep the Dragon Riders' bloodlines pure. Thus, it was not a surprise when Aegon married his elder sister, Visenya. What was not expected, however, was Aegon would take a second wife in his younger sister, Rhaenys. By tradition, he would have only been expected to wed his older sister, Visenya. The inclusion of Rhaenys as a second wife was unusual, though not totally without precedent. It is said by some that Aegon wed Visenya out of duty, and Rhaenys out of love and desire. It is known that both Aegon and Visenya had claimed their dragons Balerion and Vhagar prior to their marriage. We cannot say when Rhaenys claimed her own dragon, Meraxes. However, given she was the youngest of the siblings, it is possible she claimed her dragon after she married Aegon rather than before. While we do not know the circumstances of Aegon's father, Aerion Targaryen's death, or how long ago it occurred, it is speculated to have been long enough before the Conquest to allow for Aegon to spend the next few years preparing himself for it. Aegon would play a small role during the Century of Blood in Essos, where he would gain his first and only known combat experience before the Conquest. When Valyria burned, his empire shattered into hundreds of pieces and left a huge power vacuum in Essos. According to history, Orion, a dragon rider who had been visiting Cahor when the Doom came, proclaimed himself the first Emperor of Valyria and raised forces from Corric. With his dragon, an army of 30,000 men, he marched to claim Valyria's remains, but none were ever seen again. It's not clear how Orion met his end. Volantis and the mightiest of the 9 free cities laid claim to Valyria's empire. Meanwhile, the Dothraki rode out of the east, sacking and burning towns and cities in their way, leading to the destruction of several kingdoms that were under Valyrian control. As Valyria's first daughter, the first of the Valyrian colonies, the Voluntees regarded themselves as the rightful successors to the Dragonlords. The so-called Tigers, agreed Volantene nobles, descent of Valyrian blood, called for war upon the other cities, taking control of Lys and Myr and commanding the southern reaches of the Rhoyne. Resistance began when Volantis attempted to take control of Tyrosh, and in the end, all of the free cities, save for Lorath, either rebelled against Volantis or joined the alliance against them. Pentosh gave Tyrosh aid in their resistance, while Myr and Lys rebelled. Cahor and Norvos made an alliance against Volantis and destroyed much of the Volantene fleet controlling the Rhoyne at Dagger Lake. The Titan's wrath was provoked in Braavos, and the Sea Lord of Braavos sent 100 ships to Lys for further aid. The war would even reach Westeros, when Argilac Durrandon, the Storm King, led a host from the Stormlands into the disputed lands of Essos, where he defeated an army from the Voluntees attempting to retake Myr. It was during this time that Pentos and Tyrosh also approached the last remaining Dragon Lords, House Targaryen on Dragonstone, and the young, now Lord, Aegon Targaryen, who agreed to join the alliance against Volantis. He mounted his dragon, Balerion, and flew to Lys, where a Volantene fleet was preparing an invasion. He set the fleet ablaze, and as far as we can tell, this is the only time a member of House Targaryen, between the Doom and the Conquest, actively engaged in war. Some speculated Aegon was using his short involvement in the Century of Blood not only to test himself, but also the viability of a dream, his ambition to forge Westeros into his own mighty kingdom. I wanted to try something a little bit different with this pre-Conquest series. While the focus of these Targaryen videos has always been strictly telling the history and lore, without my own interpretation really added to it, especially with these pre-Conquest videos, I wanted to add a little post-episode analysis at the end, where I can talk about some of the ideas and theories, as well as other out-of-lore key information that we have. Whilst the canon of the books and the shows are two very different things and separate entities, it's hard to ignore how the addition of Aegon's prophecy to House of the Dragon changes the context of his pre-Conquest life. If the prophecy is canon to the books, which is something I think will be confirmed in future books, then it really changes how we look at some of the things he did pre-Conquest. Namely, the motivation with his trip to Oldtown, given the actions of House Hightower during the Conquest, as well as House Targaryen's sudden conversion to the faith of the Seven, with Oldtown being the home of the faith. I also think the idea of the prophecy also adds stock to the concept that he likely visited other places in Westeros that we don't know of. If he had this dream of the coming long night, the fan theory that he visited the Wall makes sense. But more than that, this added context of Aegon's motivation helps explain why after near 150 years sat on Dragonstone, House Targaryen suddenly decided to be more than petty lords, when they always had the power to take Westeros if they wanted. It makes Aegon's choice to invade a lot less sudden, and a more resolution of years of preparation and planning. House of the Dragon also added the idea of the cat's paw dagger from Game of Thrones was once Aegon's, and the prophecy is inscribed upon the blade, only visible when heated. A popular fan theory which I've made a video on is that the prophecy was in fact never Aegon's, rather it was Rhaenys's, and that the dagger was in fact her dagger and not Aegon's, with each of the 3 heads of the dragon each having their own Valyrian steel weapon, with the dagger suiting Rhaenys better than the swords her siblings wielded. In all, it's always struck me as off. We know so little about the pre-Conquest House Targaryen. So much so, I've always felt that George R. R. Martin has intentionally tried to keep it vague for the purpose of some big reveal down the road in future books, similar to how all the current information around the tragedy at Summerhall has intentionally been kept vague, as this information will serve a key purpose in the story to come. I suspect, given we have the Aegon's Conquest spin-off show in development, George R. R. Martin has fleshed out his version of the pre-Conquest history, with some of these ideas being incorporated into this new show in order to flesh out the characters of Aegon, Visenya and Rhaenys, given how little we really know about them.